Hello guys, we're back with the second video. This is still phase 1 of our current roadmap. In today's video, we will work on adding the functionality of sending our email to multiple recipients in the To field, the CC field, and the BCC field, which stands for blind carbon copy. So let's get to it. If you're new to this video, feel free to check out my previous video where I added basic functionalities for sending a mail. We went over how to retrieve login credentials from the text file in Retrieve Credentials. We then learned how to construct the email to our intended singular recipient in Construct Email. Then we also learned how to send the email using SMTP and SSL in Send Email. The input prompts and function calls were all taken care of in the main function. Now, in order to send the mail to CC and BCC, it's actually quite simple. Remember that we're using the email message library? Hence, it's actually quite easy. We can add the CC option by writing email and pass in CC. And for the BCC option, we can write email and pass in BCC. Done. Just kidding. There are some issues with this email, as we will see soon. And of course, I still have yet to add the multiple recipients option. But firstly, let's run the code. It asks us for a recipient as usual. I will use a temporary email address service and pass in this weird email address as the recipient. Pass in a subject and write a message. Now let's check our temporary email service. Great, our email comes in this temporary service. Let's check my other two emails. Strangely, we see that there's no emails. I blurred the other emails, but you can check the timestamp and it should be 7:58 p.m. But the last email received was 7:42 and 7:49 for this inbox. So what's going on? Well, even though we set the CC and BCC in our construct email, in our smtp.sendmail function, we're actually sending the email to our recipient only, which was just a temporary email address. Let's change that up and include those emails as well in our smtp.sendmail function. I'm hard coding for now since it's easier to get to the point that way. Let's create a list called emails and assign the recipient and the other two emails as well. This time, all three email addresses will receive the emails. Let's run the code again, fill in the information, and check our email inboxes. As expected, the email comes in our temporary email addresses, and it also comes to our other two inboxes as well. Well, that's expected, but let's check the addresses mentioned. In our inbox, which was intended as CC, we see that we correctly received the CC label, but we can also see who was mentioned in BCC. But that literally ruins the purpose of BCC, because recipients with the label blind carbon copy should be invisible to the others. So we basically need a way to deliver the emails to everyone, but ensure that no one can see the BCC email except the one who's receiving the BCC email. How do we do that? I'll actually let you attempt this. Take a few minutes to try to figure out how to do this. Hint, see if you can figure out how to hide this part from the others. Well, if you figured out, congrats. If not, don't worry, because we're getting into it right away. In order to hide the BCC from the others, what we can do is simply not include it in for the others, but just for the BCC intended recipient. That means this line of email BCC equals blah, 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 can be omitted from the construct email and be added right before sending it to the BCC recipient. Let's remove the BCC email from the emails list and create a separate smtp.sendmail call for just the BCC intended email. So essentially what's happening is that all the other emails will receive the emails as usual without the BCC recipient, and only the BCC intended recipient will receive the email with their label. Let's try to run the code now. We'll fill in the necessary information. Let's check my inboxes. In the To recipient inbox, the email is received normally. For our BCC intended recipient, we can see all the addresses including CC and BCC as well. And for our CC intended recipient, we can only see the CC and the To, but not the BCC. And that's exactly how it should be. Of course, things get trickier with multiple recipients. Anyways, first, let's make the fields dynamic instead of being hard-coded. In our main function, we will rename the recipient variable into our To field. We will also prompt for our CC field, and then our BCC field. Let's pass these variables as arguments to our construct email function, and let's modify the parameters from that function as well. We will rename recipient, add CC field, and BCC field as well. We'll pass this inside the functions into our email message object. And of course, to send this email to these email addresses, we also have to pass in these emails to our send email function as well. That also means we have to modify the parameters as well for this function. I'll send mails separately to the to recipient, the CC recipient, and the BCC recipient. The reason for doing this is so that if we get an error, we will know which of these fields were invalid. Let's remove the now redundant emails list. At this point, we can check again, but it'll be correct since I haven't changed much except add prompting. So I'll speed this through. Now we add the functionality of multiple recipients. Let's say we want to add multiple emails separated by commas. We can do that, but this entire string will then be treated as one email address. That's going to show some errors. So we need to separate them into separate email addresses. Good thing that we have list comprehension to do exactly that. And now we can create a list of these two separate emails using the split method and passing in comma as a separator. Now let's do this for the other fields as well. I'll print this out as well for debugging purpose. Let's run and test. We add two emails. Pressing enter returns us to how the list looks like. Notice that the second email has a space before it. That's because that's how I passed it into the terminal actually. The limiter is a comma, not a comma and a space. That's why the space also is considered. To remove these trailing spaces, we can add the function strip to each of these words. We covered this function in the previous video, but basically it removes any trailing or leading white spaces from each of our strings. Now, no matter how many spaces we give, or even if we give no spaces, it still works. In the first video, I added these explicit types, but I'll remove them for two reasons. Firstly, I'll send in lists, not strings. And secondly, in Python, we actually don't even need this. A cool way to remove multiple same entries at the same time is by using Ctrl-D. When clicking on the str, the other occurrences also gets highlighted. And I'll press Ctrl-D. Each time I press Ctrl-D, there's another cursor in these occurrences. Makes it much easier to remove now. Press Escape to stop the multiple cursor typing. The BCC field is not being used by construct email function, so let's remove that. Now, an interesting question. These are lists of strings which will contain multiple email addresses. Will the smtp.sendmail function work by passing in the whole list? Let's see. We pass in two addresses for the to field, none for CCC and one for BCC. Checking our inboxes, we can see that all emails have arrived correctly and the two intended recipients have also been labeled properly. Wow, that's great. Let's remove the code result equals empty dictionary since there's now checks for each recipient field. And that's that. Except I've realized one fatal problem. Can you figure it out? Hint, it has something to do with the BCC emails. Watch my 9mm go bang. Well, basically, since we use the same tactic for BCC, CC, and to fields as well, if we actually put in multiple BCC email addresses, each of these BCC recipients will be able to see the other BCC recipient. Let's test it out. Let's supply the necessary information. I'll put the temp email in the to field, none in CC, and two addresses in the BCC field. And there's another bug. Nice. Turns out there was an issue in the constructor email function. I removed the BCC field parameter in the function definition originally, but I passed it anyways as an argument when calling it. Let's remove that. Running that code again, resupplying the information. error in CC as there's no email address in CC. That's fine. Let's check our inboxes. The temp inbox has it. And as we can see in one of the BCC recipients inboxes, we can see both the intended BCC recipient and the other recipient as well. Well, that's not used. So let's modify the code. We will look through each of the BCC emails, set the BCC field as that email address, and then send the emails to each of them. However, it still won't be enough. So before each of the entry, we will delete the BCC field and then reassign it as a fresh email to update that field. You can try to omit this line and try for yourself. If you do run into any issues, look up the documentation of the email message library, specifically this section. I'll paste it in the description as well. Let's run the code again. Anyways, now it works. Checking the inbox, we can see that each of the BCC recipient can only see itself and no other BCC recipients. That's all for today. Thanks for sticking until here, and we'll start phase 2 in the next video. See you then.